Hi everybody, so today we're going to be doing notes on section 9.4, which is solving by completing the square. So far we've looked at solving by factoring and solving by taking the square root. So this is a new way of solving, but it's also going to incorporate taking the square root as well. So we'll see that pop up again. First thing I want to talk about is kind of what this actually means. So let's say, for example, we have a square. And a square, all four sides are the same length because it's a square. Which means if we say that the left side is x plus 3, then that means all the other sides, top, bottom, and right, are also x plus 3. So when we think about what this means, I want to talk about finding the area of this. So the area would be equal to length times width. So x plus 3 times x plus 3. But this can also be written as x plus 3 quantity squared, because there are two of them. Oops. Hang on, my document camera just cut out. Okay, there we go. So it can also be written like this. This is what we're going to be looking at today. So our goal is to make our equation have this, something that looks like this in it, a term squared. So when we say completing the square, and our answer looks like that, this is where it comes from. All right, so what I want you to do now is write down the steps. So I'm going to zoom this out. So go ahead and pause, write down the steps, and then I'll go through and explain it. All right, so step 1, divide by the a value if a is not equal to 1. This is only if it's necessary. For the most part in this class, we will not see any where your a value is not equal to 1. That's more for geometry and algebra 2, but I still want to include it because it is technically the first step. Step 2 is to move the constant to the other side of the equal sign. So for example, if we have ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0, we want to move the constant over. So move the c term over to the other side. Then step 3 is to complete the square. So this is the really big important part that allows us to write our answer like this up here. So we're going to take whatever number b is, take that b value and divide it by 2 and then square it. And then we add that to both sides of our equation. Once we have that, then we're going to factor the perfect square, which will be the left-hand side. And then you'll solve by taking the square root. So let's look at an actual example. All right, so step 1, my a value is already equal to 1, so I can skip step 1. Step 2, move the constant to the other side. This I do need to do because our negative 15 is over here, and I need it on the other side. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. And I'll show that in blue, or sorry, not in blue, in green. So I'm going to add 15 to both sides. So when I do that, we are going to end up with x squared plus 14x plus, now I'm going to leave a little space, equals 15 plus, I'm going to leave a little space. I really like doing that because it reminds me that I need to fill something in, which is where that b divided by 2 squared quantity comes in. All right, so that's what we're going to do now. So b divided by 2 quantity squared. What is my b value? If you said 14, you are correct. So 14 divided by 2 squared. This is equal to 7 squared, which is 49. So that's what I'm adding to both sides. I am adding 49 to the left side, 49 to the right side. Now, I need to factor this left side. So let me do that in another color. So when I factor this, you can either do this using the big X, but you know your answer is going to be in this form because that's what completing the square is. And I'm going to go ahead and simplify the right side. It's equal to 64. So when we factor this, the top is 49 and the bottom is 14. So what are two numbers that multiply to get the top and add to get the bottom? If you said 7 and 7, you are correct. And I want to point out this 7, it's that same number twice. And that's purposeful. That is because this is the factor x plus 7 quantity squared. I also want to point out too, you may start to see a pattern as we do more of these. Your b divided by 2 term was 7, positive 7, and positive 7 is what goes here. That will be a trend that's going to happen. All right, we've completed step 3 and step 4. So now the last one is step 5, solve by taking the square root. So I'm going to take the square root of the left side, square root of the right side. Remember, we need to add that plus or minus. So this will become x plus 7 equals plus or minus what? If you said 8, you are correct. And then last but not least, we just need to solve this. So we're going to have x plus 7 equals 8. And we're going to have x plus 7 equals negative 8. So both of these, you subtract 7 from both sides. Let's put that down a little bit and get x equals 1 and x equals negative 15. So when I write my final answer, I put the smallest number first. That's just good form. Oh, hang on, Lucy's sitting on my computer. Sorry about that. I didn't want her to turn anything off. So there we go. That is our answer. Oh my goodness, she did push buttons. Hang on, I'm trying to figure out where to pause this. Okay, here we go. All right, let's look at another example. So what's the first thing that we need to do with this problem? If you said add 5 to both sides, you are absolutely correct. So we need to move that constant over to the other side. So I'm going to add 5 to both sides. Cancels out on the left side. So what I'm left with now is x squared plus 2x plus, I'm going to leave a little blank space, equals 5 plus, and again, leave a little blank space. Next up, we need to find our b divided by 2 term. I'm going to do it over here this time just to make it a little bit less all smushed together. So b divided by 2. What is my b value this time? If you said 2, you are correct. So 2 divided by 2 squared, which is 1 squared, which is 1. So I'm going to add 1 to both sides. And now this left side, this is what we factor. So again, with this, you can either choose to do the big X and factor it, which is perfectly fine. But what we do know is that it's going to be in this form. And we know it'll be equal to 6. But we know it's going to be in that form. So we know it's X. And if you factored using the big X, you would get 1 and 1. Or if you use that nifty little trick with our b divided by 2 term, positive 1 is also here. So I'm going to add that little note. Let me get a different color. So this is also the b divided by 2 term. So this is also the b divided by 2 term. All right. Now I just realized my arrow kind of took up some space on that, so I'm just going to rewrite this again. If your arrow didn't take up space, then that's fine. You don't have to rewrite it. What do I do next to solve this? If you said take the square root of both sides, you are correct. So square root of the left side, square root of the right side, add that plus or minus. So I'm going to have x plus 1 equals plus or minus. Now the square root of 6, that does not break down and give me any perfect squares, so it's just going to stay the square root of 6. Now when I solve this, remember this is like when we solve by taking the square root. You can either just subtract 1 from both sides and write your answer as -1 plus or minus rad 6, or you can still separate this as 2 equations. So x plus 1 equals positive rad 6, and x plus 1 equals negative rad 6. And subtract 1 from both sides. And you get x equals -1 plus rad 6, and x equals -1 minus rad 6. So you can either write your answer like that, or the way I personally prefer to write my answer, I'm going to put a big old or, is just to write it as x equals -1 plus or minus rad 6. I personally prefer writing it like the second option, but it is totally acceptable to write it either way. All right, let's look at another example. So this one, super nice, our constant is already on the other side. So I can just skip that step because it's already done for me. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to rewrite this now with my little plus and a blank space for both of those. And we need to find our b divided by 2 quantity squared term. All right, so go ahead and finish finding the b divided by 2 squared term, and then push play when you're ready to check. All right, go ahead and check your work. Should have gotten 16. So now the left side, if we factor this, our b divided by 2 term was -4, which means this will be x minus 4, or you can still factor it using the big X if you prefer, equals -9. Now, when I take the square root of both sides, what is the square root of -9? If you said no solution, you are correct. We cannot take the square root of a negative number. Later, once you get to Algebra 2, you'll learn something called imaginary numbers, which do allow you to do this. But for now in Algebra 1, we are not going to be looking at those. So you can get the x minus 4 equals, but then that doesn't work. So our answer is no solution. And I'll put a little note. Can't take the square root of a negative number. And let me just go ahead and highlight that. All right, last 2 examples. I want you to try these 2 problems on your own. So go ahead and push pause, and then when you're ready to check your answers, push play. Go ahead and check your answers for both of these problems. So part A was nice. Your constant term was already moved over. So I just rewrote it with my little blank spaces and then found my b divided by 2 squared term, filled it in, factor it, and it is not a perfect square and nothing comes out of the radical. So I just left it as the square root of 2. Now, if you wrote your answer as 2 plus rad 2, comma, 2 minus rad 2, that is still perfectly fine. That was still considered correct. Then for part B, you needed to move the constant over. You had to move over 16. Then find your b over 2 squared term. Now this one had a square root of 25, which is a perfect square. So that's how we got the plus or minus 5. And then you set up your 2 separate equations and solve each of them, and that's how you get the -2 and 8. All right, that is the end of our notes. Have a good rest of your day.